She's not just cleaning. She's not just checking. She's not just counting. What she's doing is trying to survive. To an outside observer, it looks like obsessive behavior, maybe even irrational. She locks the door and then checks it again. She wipes the counter until the skin on her fingers cracks. She rereads the same message 5 times before sending it. But underneath each of those actions lies something deeper than the compulsion itself. Fear. Not of dirt, not of mistakes, but of emotional chaos she cannot name. According to Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, obsessive-compulsive behavior is not just a disorder of behavior, it's a disorder of misidentified identity. The brain gets hijacked, the thoughts come in like fire alarms, and the body reacts to them as if they were true emergencies. For many women, these obsessive patterns become the only way they know how to regulate what is otherwise unbearable inner chaos. This isn't about being neat. It's about silencing the scream inside. What is this scream? Often, it's not even conscious. It comes from early trauma, moments in which she was powerless, voiceless, unseen. Maybe she lived in a home where emotions were punished. Maybe she had to be perfect to be loved. Maybe she experienced violence or instability that forced her young brain to develop hypervigilance just to feel safe. That vigilance never went away. It simply evolved into ritual. The cleaning soothes. The checking protects. The counting brings control. In his work with OCD patients, Dr. Schwartz describes 4 steps that can break the cycle: relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue. But before any of that can happen, there must be awareness, not just of the behavior, but of the story behind it. So we begin by asking not why does she clean so much, but instead, what happens to her body when the room is messy? We don't ask why does she need to check that email again. We ask, what terror might flood her nervous system if she sends something wrong? In other words, we trace the compulsion back to its root, the threat of psychological annihilation, the fear that if she doesn't act, if she doesn't ritualize, everything will collapse, including herself. This is the mind on trauma. And trauma doesn't just live in memory, it lives in patterns, in muscle, in thought, in response. That's why compulsions feel so urgent, because the brain, particularly the basal ganglia, which stores habitual behavior, is stuck in a survival loop. The amygdala is screaming, the prefrontal cortex is hijacked, and she is no longer reasoning, she is reacting. What's most cruel is that many women with these symptoms feel ashamed of their compulsions. They call themselves crazy, weak, neurotic. But these rituals are not signs of weakness. They are signs of an intelligent mind doing whatever it can to survive emotional terror. Dr. Schwartz insists that you are not your thoughts, and this truth is liberating because it creates space. The moment she sees the thought as a symptom rather than a self-definition, she can begin the process of rewiring her brain. And with every act of conscious awareness, of naming the pattern without becoming it, she begins to reclaim control from the inside out. But the process is not linear. She will fall back into old rituals. The mind will whisper, just check once more, just clean again. And that's okay. What matters is that now, when she hears those whispers, she knows they're echoes, not truths. The scream inside, it may never fully disappear, but it no longer runs the show. This is what healing looks like. Quiet, repetitive, brave.
She doesn't just question reality. She questions herself, constantly. Did I say something wrong? Did I offend them? What if they're mad at me and I didn't notice? She replays the conversation in her head over and over, analyzing each word, each pause, each tone. She tries to decode the meaning behind silence. She searches for certainty in a sea of ambiguity. This is mental checking, one of the most invisible yet devastating forms of obsessive-compulsive coping. Unlike hand-washing or door locking, mental checking leaves no trace behind. No one sees it. No one validates it. Yet it consumes hours of her day and all of her energy. It's not about truth. It's about reassurance. She's not trying to know. She's trying to feel safe. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz describes this loop as the false comfort cycle, where the mind generates an intrusive doubt and then creates a ritual, often internal, to neutralize the anxiety. In this case, the ritual is mental analysis. But just like any compulsion, the relief is temporary. In fact, the more she checks, the more uncertain she becomes. And this is the paradox of OCD. The mind seeks certainty in an uncertain world, but the very act of trying to force certainty strengthens the fear. It reinforces the brain's idea that there must be danger. Otherwise, why would we keep checking? For women with a trauma history, this pattern often begins in childhood, when love was conditional, when safety depended on reading the moods of others, when survival meant becoming hyper-aware of social cues. In such environments, mental checking wasn't a disorder, it was a defense. It allowed her to predict and prevent emotional harm. Now, as an adult, that defense has turned into an obsession. The threat may no longer be real, but her brain still believes it is. This is what Dr. Schwartz calls brain lock, the brain's primitive fear circuitry becoming stuck in a loop of overactivation. The orbital frontal cortex detects a potential problem, the cingulate gyrus triggers the feeling of unease, and the caudate nucleus, which should help shift gears, fails to do so. The result? Thought spirals, repetitive loops, mental torture. But there is a way out. Dr. Schwartz's method begins with relabeling the intrusive thought. This is not me. This is an OCD thought. By labeling the fear as a symptom, not a signal, she begins to create distance from it. Next comes reattributing, understanding that the thought is caused by a glitch in the brain's wiring, not a reflection of truth or reality. With this foundation, she can refocus, redirecting her attention to something constructive, even if anxiety lingers. And finally, she revalues the thought, recognizing it as meaningless noise, not worthy of time or fear. But this takes practice, it takes repetition, and above all, it takes self-compassion, something she was likely never taught. Because for most of her life, she's been told she's too sensitive, too anxious, too much. But the truth is, she was just too alone with too many emotions and no roadmap for how to hold them. So now she builds that map herself. Each time she notices a mental loop and names it without acting on it, she lays down a new neural path. Each time she chooses not to search for reassurance, she weakens the grip of the old habit. Each time she allows the discomfort to exist without control, she proves to her brain that she is not in danger. And slowly, she starts to hear something underneath the scream, a whisper, one that says, "You're okay now." And maybe, just maybe, she starts to believe it.
She doesn't always ask the same question, but she always needs the same answer. Yes, you're okay. No, you didn't mess up. You're not in danger. Reassurance, subtle, compulsive, and endlessly addictive, becomes her emotional lifeline. It may look like casual conversation. Do you think I upset her? Was that email too blunt? Should I apologize again? To the outside world, it seems like normal doubt, but inside, the stakes feel catastrophic. Her nervous system is holding its breath, waiting for someone else to give her permission to exhale. This is reassurance seeking, a mental loop driven not by curiosity, but by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of guilt, fear of being fundamentally wrong. And beneath it all, the deeper fear that if she doesn't ask, something terrible will happen or has already happened, and it will be her fault. According to Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, this compulsive need for reassurance is another manifestation of the brain's malfunctioning error detection system. The same neural pathways that trigger a hand-washing compulsion in one person can manifest as verbal checking in another. In her case, the obsession isn't germs or order, it's approval, connection, the illusion of relational safety. When trauma is part of the past, especially relational trauma, this pattern makes perfect sense. If love once came with unpredictability, if the people who were supposed to protect her also caused her pain, then certainty becomes a matter of survival. Reassurance is not about peace, it's about control. But the relief is temporary. The brain doesn't learn safety from being told you're fine. It learns from experiencing fear without avoidance. And each time she asks again, she teaches her mind that the fear was valid, that she was right to panic. Over time, this feedback loop becomes stronger than logic. The reassurance doesn't help. It hijacks her. Dr. Schwartz's approach invites her to step out of the loop, not by suppressing the question, but by changing her relationship to it. Instead of chasing the answer, she learns to notice the urge and pause. This is a brain glitch. I don't need to believe it. I don't need to solve it. This space, even just a few seconds, is enough to start rewiring. Because the truth is, the questions never end. They only multiply. And the more she relies on others to soothe her internal chaos, the more she loses trust in her own perception. But trust can be rebuilt, one moment at a time, one pause at a time. She begins to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. She allows the what-ifs to float by like clouds, not truths to analyze, but noise to witness. She stops asking her partner for the 10th time if they're upset. She stops rereading the message again and again. She resists the urge to confess something just to feel clean. She chooses discomfort over control, and in doing so, she slowly reclaims her power. Because what she really needed all along wasn't a yes or no. It wasn't certainty. It was safety. And now she's learning that safety can't be found in others' answers. It has to be felt in her own body. Cultivated, practiced, relearned. This isn't easy. It's a daily discipline. But every time she lets the question go unanswered, she tells her brain a new story. That fear can exist without needing to fix it.
She folds her clothes 3 times before placing them in the drawer. Not because she enjoys it, but because something inside whispers, if it's not perfect, something bad will happen. This is not about cleanliness. It's about control. Control over the uncontrollable. Control over the chaos that once exploded without warning in a childhood home, in a toxic relationship, or in the battlefield of her own mind. Perfectionism is often praised in women, especially in trauma survivors. Society calls it discipline, high standards, ambition. But beneath the surface, perfectionism can be a compulsive shield against vulnerability, a strategy to survive environments where one mistake meant punishment, where approval was conditional, where being imperfect felt unsafe. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz describes this as a core distortion in the brain's processing of error signals. In obsessive-compulsive behavior, the brain falsely detects that something is wrong, and keeps alerting, even when there's no real threat. For the perfectionist, this alarm comes in the form of endless editing, adjusting, fixing, arranging. It's not just that she wants things to be right. It's that her brain tells her they must be right, or else. And the or else is never clearly defined. That's what makes it so terrifying. She may spend hours rewriting a sentence in an email, rereading messages for tone, adjusting the angle of a framed photo on the wall. But it's not the task that exhausts her. It's the silent threat she's constantly trying to outrun, that she'll be exposed, blamed, or abandoned. This compulsive need to control her external world mirrors a deep inability to feel safe within her internal world. And that's where the work begins. Dr. Schwartz's method doesn't aim to erase the perfectionist impulse. Instead, it retrains the brain to recognize the impulse without obeying it, to see the urge as a neurological misfire, a false signal, not a command. Step 1 is awareness. I'm noticing the need to fix this, but I know it's OCD speaking. Step 2 is relabeling, understanding that the distress isn't about the object, but about a mental error loop. Step 3 is refocusing, choosing to redirect her attention towards something purposeful, even when the anxiety remains. Step 4 is revaluing, remembering that her thoughts are symptoms, not truths, not reflections of her character. With practice, this 4-step method builds something stronger than perfection: resilience. The resilience to sit with discomfort, to release the fantasy of control, to accept that life and she are allowed to be messy. And slowly, she finds herself folding the shirt just once. She resists the urge to fix the sentence again. She posts the photo even though it's not perfectly edited. She lets someone see her, unfiltered. In these moments, her healing is not loud. It's not dramatic, but it's real. She is not trying to be perfect anymore. She is learning to be free. And in the silence that follows, the silence that used to be filled with screaming, she begins to hear something new. Not fear, not warning, but peace.